in the same way that like when you build a puppet and you need to make sure that like all of the mechs run smoothly, and they've got a really nice lever, and you're comfortable in there with your hand and the rods work the right way. A program has to do the same thing, or a flyer or a poster have to do that same thing for the users and the people who are reading that.
Welcome back to Puppeteers. I'm your host, Adam Krutinger, and today we have a very special guest where I'm actually going to be interviewing Cameron Garrity. Welcome to the show, Cameron Garrity.
Thank you so much. I've been a fan of the show for quite a while, so it's a pleasure to finally be here.
Oh, yeah, good. Yeah, no, I know this is something that you've been trying to convince me to do for quite some time now, and I was not for it, just because I just wasn't, I don't know. And but it took a world pandemic for Cameron Garrity to get his way. So without any further ado, let's jump into it.
All right.
Now, I'm going to start off the way that we actually always start off the show, which is kind of what's going on for you right now. And I do want to actually kind of make that puppetry related as much as you can, considering everything that is going on in the world.
I'm a member of Buffalo Comedy Sports, which is a local improv team, and we perform regularly every other week in
So wait, you
Amherst.
do stuff besides puppetry?
I do stuff besides puppetry.
I was going to say, because some of the things, of course, that I should have said before that people know you from is, of course, the podcast. But a lot of people know you from your puppet-related TED Talk that you've done, which has done really well, and people have gotten a lot of value out of that. What was that called again?
That was called The Power of Puppetry, and we did that for TEDxBuffalo.
That's right, The Power of Puppetry. We'll make sure we put a link up here, too, for that. But
Yeah, sure.
and we'll get into those things, too. But, yeah, so tell us about the comedy sports.
Yeah, well, comedy sports, it's competitive improvisational comedy. So there's like a red team and a blue team, and it kind of follows similar games of like what was the show? Whose Line Is It Anyways? But you compete for points, and there's a ref, and there's all these games and stuff. And so we do that regularly. There's a puppet version of that show that I'm in, where it's called Flesh versus Felt. And so I do the whole show as a puppet character, and it's Avenue Q style, just on my you see me and the puppet. But we're also working on, because that theater, which is the arena in Buffalo, in Amherst, right where just about where you are actually. There's other kinds of shows. There's after hour shows, which are able to be a little naughtier, a little more freeform, and we're working and developing on a puppet version of that.
That's right,
Which will be kind of cool. And so me and a couple of the people from Comedy Sports are kind of developing that, and I've got that on the back burner for now. Damon College, where I work as a graphic designer, we're planning some puppet stuff for the school there, and I'm always writing spec scripts and such. So those, as you know, are writing a script for The Office or Bob's Burgers or Sesame Street. I'm always kind of working on a couple of those, and I'm actually working on one right now for a new Muppet movie, which is never going to get made. But it's practicing the writing skills in a fun way. So
yeah,
those are some
of
the things that I'm doing right now.
I want to talk about that in a couple ways. Because I know I have enjoyed a lot of your spec scripts that you've made over the years. I know you have them linked on your website as well, so if people want to check those out. And I do want to talk about your Muppet movie a little bit that you are writing for exercise. But before we get into that, I do want to just talk about the writing process itself a little bit, because it's something that you have a lot of experience in and you're not afraid of, which is probably, I would say, it's one of the art forms that a lot of artists and creatives are afraid of. And it took me a long time to get over that fear as well. And I am fully over it. Now I do write stuff. But the hardest thing for me, especially being a maker, is to carve out that time for writing. Because you feel like you have to write when you have the inspiration. But the thing is, I'm sure you can relate to this too, you don't necessarily usually have that inspiration unless you carve out some time for it as well. So what is your process for making sure because you do so many other things too with your graphic design, with the puppetry, with the comedy sports, how do you make sure you find time to write?
It's definitely difficult, and I'm not the best at it. But I definitely try to kind of carve out time. Usually 2 or 3 times a week where I just spend a half hour in a Word document, or sometimes in a notebook, and kind of scribble out ideas. And a lot of, sometimes the things will start with a pun or a really silly joke that I want to build around. And the thing that I think is most important for me personally, with the way I work, is being receptive to that in the time that I'm not writing. um, Things when I'm, sometimes I'm in the car and driving, and I've got the radio on and I'm not really listening, and an idea pops in and I'm like, oh, I got to write that down. So I'll shoot myself a voice memo. Or I'm brushing my teeth, or I'm just waking up and it's like, oh my gosh, that's a really good piece to the puzzle that I'm trying to solve. And I'll jot that down so that when I then go to the time in my journal, or in the Word document in the script writing program, that I kind of have some new clues to kind of solve um, that equation, because that's kind of how I look at it. And then one other thing that I will say, and this is something that I learned a lot from Ronnie Burkett and Robert Smythe, who were
Mm.
really influential in helping me learn how to write scripts and stuff, was that the worst thing you could have is a blank page. So if you have something, anything, even if it's just like, oh, piggy bank, um, that you have that to kind of start to write around, so that as quickly as you can, you want to be rewriting as opposed to writing.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And yeah, and actually, I should say it for myself too. For my inspiration that got me over the hump for writing was my class with Robert Smythe as
Yeah.
well. That because before then I had no confidence in it at all, and
Mhm.
literally only took the class because it was the only thing available at the O'Neill. But it was probably one of the most valuable classes I have ever taken, ever.
Yeah. It was,
And
yeah, it was my first class, my first year back in 2012, and it
yeah.
like
Oh
opened
my
the
gosh.
floodgates.
Yeah, and I would love to take Ronnie's. I haven't yet, but
Yeah.
he's so brilliant too that I'm sure it'd be just as good.
Yep.
But yeah, and
Definitely.
one more thing I just want to talk about the writing too, because
Mhm.
you've kind of have two. There's two main styles of not styles of writing, but styles of project. I'll say the inspiration for the project, and some of
Yeah.
them, like you were talking about, are based around an idea, a joke, or a pun.
Mhm.
And other ones that you've worked on and been working on for years are more so to fill a void that you see, like
Yeah.
specifically with all the things that you've written for hospitals and things like that.
Mhm.
So before we get into that, I want to just talk about what is there one that you enjoy more, the more just inspired writing, or the more like trying to solve a problem?
Um, I think it's both, and I think even with the stuff that I do for hospitals, for people who don't know, I've struggled a lot with my health, especially through elementary school, high school, and college. Fortunately, we're kind of through those weeds now, but there was a lot of time that I spent in and out of hospitals and doctors' offices and such. And in that same way, I have a mission statement in my head that I'm trying to work towards with that. I want to help educate doctors. I want to help, relate with patients and other people who have gone through similar um, struggles. And so, in the same way that when I'm writing, a really stupid bit for like a Sesame spec script, then I'm like, okay, I got to make sure that I'm playing the game of an episode of Kimmy Schmidt because I want to write the Unbreakable Prairie Dawn, right?
Yeah.
In that same way, I'm thinking about how do I best create a level of empathy and realism in this thing that I'm doing for a hospital. And so it's slightly different, but it's also very similar in the way that I kind of always have an endpoint that I'm trying to work towards.
Mm.
And one of the best things that I had learned from working with Ronnie was the thought of knowing what the final image of a show is going to be,
Mm.
um, and being able to write towards that, knowing what your opening line and your closing line is, so you have those bookends, and then you get to shade stuff in, has always been really helpful for me in my own creative process.
Yeah, that's great. It must, I guess here's one thing I'd ask you then that might give value to people listening.
Mhm.
For people who don't have that compass of that direction of where to go, what do you think might be a good starting point for them? I think that's the hardest
Um,
thing to come over. People are like, oh, I want to write something and I want it to be maybe for kids or for adults, but what should it be about? You know?
Yeah, it's challenging for sure. I it sounds kind of weird, but like I have the benefit of having gone through the struggles that I have, because it's really given me sort of a mission and a north star of like, that's the thing that I want to be working on, and that's the story that
Mm.
I want to tell. Um, but for
But
people who are just starting, I think there are different exercises that you could do to kind of work those storytelling muscles in your brain,
Mhm.
and then be able to extrapolate that to like the bigger project that you want to do.
Mm.
Something that a project that we did with Ronnie once was that he gave us like 11 items that were just random. And he said, as we were doing that exercise, like, I'm just picking these out of thin air, but it was like, pick a book, pick an article of clothing, pick, a favorite song, pick, there are all these different things. And he said, imagine throwing them in a suitcase. And one of those things in that suitcase has come to life. And now you need to tell a story of why they're running away from their situation. Um, so you've got all these pieces, and I keep saying it's like trying to solve a puzzle,
Mm.
um because to me that's really what it is. Like, you have all these elements, and people who are listening, they probably have that one idea that they really like, or they have the thought like, oh, I really want to do a show about magicians, um or I have this puppet, and it's a box of crayons. I've been seeing that behind you.
Mhm.
And how do I incorporate that? And so you have these elements that you kind of, no matter what kind of project you're working on, you kind of have to think like, all right, I've got, three people on my team. So I gotta, we have these limitations, and it's about learning to work with those. So the more that you could create those elements in a smaller project that doesn't really mean anything, those are just like those exercises, I think, the better. Another thing, this was one of my favorite projects that I did with Robert, was taking a nursery rhyme, so something like Little Bo Peep, and those usually only have like 4 or 5 lines, and changing the order of those lines, and then trying to write a story and understand the blocking and the staging of why those things are revealed in that order. And I did that with Humpty Dumpty, and that kind of ended up having legs for a little bit, which was fun.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, no, those are all
Yeah.
really great tips. Yeah. And it sounds like too, one point you were making in the very beginning, about making it personal is to do something personal too. If it doesn't have to be necessarily as extreme as, your situation. It should be something that's true to you in some way. Um,
Absolutely.
Beyond those other examples you gave about those other tips for writing stuff. That's great. That's awesome. So that being said, I do want to jump into some of those projects. Can
Hmm.
we talk about one of the links that you had sent me, and I should say one of the pieces of yours that I'm familiar with, and people can see it in the link above, is Sanity Intact, which is
Yeah.
kind of ties in really well to what we were just talking about. Because
Hmm.
was that one of your first pieces that you've made on this topic?
No, that was kind of the culmination of a bunch of different pieces that I
Mm.
worked on. Sanity Intact, which for anyone who is interested is kind of one of the hashtags of mine that you could follow on Instagram, and a lot of the artwork, both graphic design and illustration and puppetry stuff, that kind of fits into this sort of mindset of like trying to um, stay sane and stay positive and optimistic during times that are sort of crazy, you could kind of just follow hashtag Sanity Intact. It's not all my stuff, but you could find a lot of my things there. Um, but yeah, that was the project that I did as an emerging artist at the O'Neill. So that was after 4 or 5 years of going through that program and doing a lot of different participant pieces and different things of trying to help people understand in a sometimes humorous, sometimes kind of emotional way of letting people know what the experience of a patient is as they go through the different stages of um, what how being chronically ill impacts your home life, your daily routines, your school schedule, what your relationships with your doctors end up becoming, and how sometimes you feel like you see certain members of your medical team more so than you do like members of your family.
Yeah.
And so the piece that I ended up doing at the O'Neill as an emerging artist was kind of trying to show that the series of images of coping with taking medicine every day and potentially having to take more and more of that medicine. The sort of relationship that you end up having with doctors who you like your pediatrician, and doctors who you don't like, sometimes the surgeons that you encounter.
Mhm.
And really trying to present that in a humorous way, in a way that kind of really used the best of different mediums of puppetry, and and really trying to be honest um, about that story. Because when I first started that project, you have about a week and a half at the O'Neill to to put together your emerging artist presentation. And at the beginning of the week, it was actually going to be very broad, in that it was really going to be like this series of fables and folk tales, and nursery rhymes and songs, about like the broad audience experience. And I realized by kind of midway through that week that I had to reel it in and really be honest and tell my own personal story, because otherwise it wasn't going to have that level of heart and of truth. And that's why it really ended up becoming, very much about my specific experience, but in that in being as specific as I could about myself, that ended up creating the broad story that people could really see and empathize with, because they saw different elements of their self in my story.
Yeah, yeah, no, I just rewatched it again this morning. I believe was I there at the O'Neill for that?
No, I think
Was
we
that your
drove
first
down
one?
together because you were there for the
Oh,
pre-conference,
that's right. Okay, yeah,
and
I
then
think I
I don't
remember
know
seeing
if
pieces or
yeah.
rehearsals of it or something. But yeah, yeah, no, in rewatching it, yeah, it just a couple things that I thought were really interesting about it too is the wide range of styles of puppetry that you used in it, including like a tabletop object manipulation, some shadow puppetry,
Mhm.
some mouth puppet, as well as some live action as yourself and as humans.
Yeah.
What kind of went into the different decisions into using the different styles for those parts?
I think that it ended up becoming a sense that there were different elements of my own personal story that I wanted to share. And I needed to find a way to kind of sort that all together. So I ended up becoming a human actor, and that I actually didn't puppeteer at all in the piece, which is kind of funny. Um, I played my pediatrician in that, and then we had three puppeteers who were wonderful: Annette Mateo, Pat Weigand, and James Godwin, actually, who's our last guest on Puppeteers. And the three of them performed all that puppetry to kind of show um, just the sort of different realms. And I don't
Mm.
necessarily know why I chose those different styles of puppetry, other than um, when I was workshopping it that week, it just really seemed to um, kind of best show the truth of those different moments,
Yeah. Well,
and
it's also
especially
a
with
metaphor in a way, with the bear being something that was comforting to you, and then
right.
also it ended up being you in certain scenes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so there were three kind of moments where you see an operating table, and it's kind of from the idea was that it was the perspective of like the medical lights that are shining down on someone when they're in the OR, and you see a completely blank Muppet style character. It was one of Ryan Dillon's whatnots that he had donated to the conference, and it was completely blank. There were no features on it, and it showed the scene of a really kind of cocky anesthesiologist who would always, when he would prick my hand going under anesthesia, he would say, "Oh, did you feel that?" And for a while, I would say like, yeah, and he would say, "Oh, that's good because I didn't." And it
Yeah.
was like this really horrible thing that I was a teenager in a children's hospital having experienced that, and it was kind of like that's really annoying. But I found out from some of the nurses that he would say that to like little kids, like it would be like a 4 or 5 year old, and that'd be the last thing they heard from someone before they went under, which is just horrible.
Yeah.
And but so what I did for that was just keep the whatnot character completely blank. I didn't want to put any features on it because I didn't want it to like look like me or look like any kind of character. I wanted everyone in that audience to kind of either imagine themselves or imagine their kid or their
Mm,
grandparents on that operating table.
yeah. Well, yeah, that's which I like, and it is strong and consistent throughout the show. In that the bear represents you, and then that whatnot represents you. The one thing I think, in looking back at it, that surprised me a little bit was that you did actually use your name for the
Yeah.
character. Was there any thought to changing that to make it seem well? Because here's the thing, because obviously
Hmm.
that would make it mean something very different to people who knew you.
Right.
Versus, it would make no difference to people who don't know you, which I guess I would say it's probably more for them anyway. So maybe there isn't too much of a difference. But I was just
Yeah.
wondering what made you decide to keep that, but change the other things.
I think at that point we were just so
Mm.
run and gunning it that was kind of the idea in the moment. I've actually talked a lot with Bob Waterhouse, who's a local theater maker. He was my advisor in college, and I've continued to work with him on things in Buffalo. And we've talked about whether or not that character should have a name at all,
Mm.
or
Yeah.
things like
Oh,
that,
interesting.
to really make it as broad as possible. I think again because it was a work in development and because of how much it had changed, and it was that realization of it should really be Cam's personal thing. In that moment, in that week of
Yeah, I see.
presentation, that we were just like, why let's use your
That's
name.
true. And then, that's kind of what the O'Neill pieces are for, too. It's for creating something in almost a workshop kind of way
Right.
that have you something to build off of, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah. Great.
absolutely.
Wow, yeah, that's great. So let's go down to one of the other ones, which is, it has, again, a similar theme, as well as that similar phrase that you hate to hear, which comes up often in your work, but the chronic tragedy as well.
Yeah. So that was sort of an original name for the project that ended up becoming Sanity Intact.
Mm.
And just the flip of that was something that kind of helped frame it in a better way. Because I applied for the O'Neill definitely two, if not three times to be an emerging artist before I finally uh, got that strand. And thank God I did because I learned so many things in those years where I didn't get that thing, but I've worked in other strands like um, learning how to write with Ronnie. And I
Of course.
did. I was in the resident company one year with Jess Simon, and I did her Ruby and Charlie project and
Mhm.
learned all about tabletop puppets in that, which really I think was a direct influence when we did those scenes with the bear. Um, but so Chronic Tragedy was just some of the projects leading up to that, um, to help kind of um, help me get angry on stage a little bit and
Oh,
kind of vent
okay.
and share. And
See, I thought it came
yeah,
after. I didn't realize it was a development thing. I
yeah,
just
it
got the order
was.
out of my head. Yeah, I thought you just made essentially a smaller version of it to work in a different type of venue. And also, if I remember correctly, it seemed like it was a little bit more descriptive as far as what the actual condition was. Because one thing I thought was interesting is the way it kind of animated and made almost like a cartoon in the way, and then the way it described the mitochondrial disease
Yeah.
as cells that make poison instead of energy.
Hmm.
And I thought that
Yeah.
was a
And
very clear image that made it, made it obvious.
yeah. So for people who aren't aware, the overall illness that I kind of ended up facing was this thing called mitochondrial disease, which is a progressive disease that hits different systems. So the mitochondria are if you remember from biology class in high school, is the powerhouse of the cell. And it makes all the good energy through a process of ATP, and that's what allows all your systems to work and create the good energy that allows you to function. And for me, in certain body areas, that those cells create ammonia and lactic acid, which is not good energy, and it kind of poisons the systems and makes the cells a little lazy. So that's what I was dealing with, and that's um, when that happens, your body actually simulates other illnesses. So for a long time, they thought that I had chronic sinusitis. They thought I had Crohn's disease, and technically I did, but it was all because the mitochondria were kind of um, puppeteering, actually, in a bad way, those different body processes. And so, yeah, for those early things, I was really trying to explain to the audience even what that thing was, the
Yeah.
mitochondrial disease, because so many people don't know about it. And so trying to illustrate it in that way was helpful, I think. And eventually, and that's one of the things that I'm working with Bob Waterhouse in expanding Sanity Intact, because right now it's the what we presented at the O'Neill was a 13-minute sort of snippet of that show,
Hmm.
um, but looking to see how we could expand it. To include things like those early chronic tragedy pieces. I did this really dumb song just my second year at the O'Neill. It was called
Oh,
"Shut Up and Eat Your Food,"
I remember.
which was all about
It
people
was fun. It
prepping.
was really fun.
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
that online for
yeah.
people to see too?
That is online for people to
Okay.
see, and it was Alyssa Honeycutt is in that,
Yeah.
and a puppet that I was performing, who's been through all of the surgeries and stuff that I had been through, in a way, was showing someone else who was going in for surgery, how you could kind of binge some food the night before, like right before you go to bed, and it'll help you kind of fill your stomach up a little bit. It doesn't really work, but it's a silly kind of mind state to get into. So we're looking to see how we could incorporate some of those other things into Sanity Intact.
Yeah, I could totally see that being combined into it
Yeah.
and making it a longer piece. That was a really they were all great pieces, but that was a really fun piece in a different way because it's so, especially if you watch the other two uh shorts,
Mhm.
you wouldn't really expect that one coming, which was kind of
No,
a nice juxtaposition to it, which is really fun. That's awesome.
absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
great. Wow. Now, something else I want to get into is
Hmm.
just, so we talked a lot about some of your work. Yeah, obviously, you have much more work that we can get into and hopefully touch upon along the way. But is some of the puppetry outreach and teaching that you have done in different ways? We've mentioned
Yeah.
the TEDxBuffalo talk. Was that one of the first things?
No, not quite, because that I did in 2013, the fall of 2013. So by that point, I had already done similar versions of that presentation at Damon College, which is where I studied graphic design and theater. Um, and we had already had our first Geppetto festival
Oh, that was
earlier that
after the
year
Geppetto
as well.
Festival?
Hmm.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, then let's get it. Oh, actually,
Yeah,
we'll come back to that too. But
sure.
definitely, people check out that TEDx Buffalo talk. Again, we have it linked in the show notes and down in the description as well. But let's talk about Geppetto as well, because that was such an amazing event. And not only that, but for me personally, is one of the first community puppetry things that I've ever really been able to be involved in,
Hmm.
which was really amazing for me. Can you talk more about where that came from?
Yeah, definitely. So when I was
Actually, what is it exactly first? Just make
Sure,
it clear for
sure.
people.
So the Geppetto Festival is it's an event, an all-day event that happens. We've done it in Buffalo, but I would love to take it other places. Uh, that the idea is that it brings new life to puppetry, and the idea really is that while things like the O'Neill and the Puppeteers of America Festival are wonderful things that are a place for puppeteers to communicate and learn and socialize and grow, they aren't really always as focused on truly educating the general public on puppetry.
Mm.
And so Geppetto was
Yeah, it's more
really a
like a
way
club
to.
almost, right?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Almost like the way a club is. Like people who are
Yeah, a little
members,
bit.
and
Which
it is
is
open. Those things are open to the public, but it does seem
right.
to kind of cater more toward its members and stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. And so the idea with Geppetto was bringing some puppeteers in. We usually had about between 10 and 15 performers who would come in and create the day's events, but they were really geared towards a public audience of an area that wasn't like New York or Connecticut or LA, where there's an established puppetry scene, and really just showing people like, what's this all about, and why do these performers do what they do, and hopefully educating people a little bit more on why, like, what the true reasons why they might like puppetry peripherally, through things like the Muppets, or if they've seen Avenue Q or Hand to God or The Lion King, and
Mhm.
hopefully gives them a deeper understanding of this art form.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah. That was. Yeah. You did that, and you did that twice.
We've done that twice, and I'm working with some people actually right now, and I don't know that you even knew this necessarily, but Creative Mornings Buffalo, which is sort
Mm.
of similar to TEDxBuffalo, but they do these monthly events with one speaker. And I'm working with that team there to kind of help rejuvenate Geppetto, because an important thing for me is that that event be completely free to the public, and that we also are able to bring in the puppeteers at no cost to them, and actually, give them a little stipend for their time for coming into Buffalo and doing that. So that's something that requires a lot of sponsorship, and so we're trying to make that happen in a way that is sustainable and good for everyone involved.
Oh, great. Does Creative Mornings have their own venue that would be, or they have to rent something out?
They don't have a venue. They actually have a series of partnerships with things like the downtown library,
Mm.
and some other sort of co-work spaces and stuff, and presenting
Yeah.
spaces. But they also are just, they're really tight knit with like sort of the local communities and things like M&T Bank and other places that sort of support the arts. So they're kind of an in, and they already are a nonprofit status, and those things to
Yeah.
that make the fundraising and the grant processing a little bit easier.
Yeah. That's great. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
so your initial question about like where that came from, and why we did that in the first place. I think, not to get like too self-reflective about it, but I think so much of my time um growing up, because I was one of those kids who like always loved puppetry, and would go to school with friends and students and teachers who um didn't love puppetry, and like trying to explain to people like, no, this is such a great thing, like,
Mhm.
and look how cool it is, and look at all these places like commercials that you like and other things where puppets kind of pop up. Um and so I had so many years of trying to um show people like why this is so cool, and would have these breakthroughs like throughout high school and stuff. I would do um, shows for like art festival or art shows, and different productions and stuff where I would kind of be able to be featured as like a puppet doing a little puppet routine. And people really like responded to that, and then I was able to do more of that in college, and wrote some plays that incorporated puppetry, and did some other things that kind of got people excited about it. And so when it came time to do my senior thesis in graphic design, I started to think about, oh, well, what if we design, what if I design a website and an accompanying puppetry festival that would kind of be this resource for puppeteers, like the ultimate
Mm,
resource for puppeteers that was like Puppet Wikipedia and Puppet Netflix and Puppet
mm.
um, like the P of A and like all these different resources and stuff all combined into one site called the Geppetto Project. And then we would have these pop-up events called the Geppetto Festival, and people would, come from near and far to present and perform and do all these things. And fortunately, Damon was really wonderful and gave me some grant money to actually bring these puppeteers in. So we did that as part of my senior capstone.
Wow, yeah, and what a wonderful piece that ended up being. Oh, did you get a good
Yeah,
grade on
yeah,
it?
I did. I got an
Good,
A.
good. Glad to hear it. That's awesome.
Two
Wow.
A's actually, because it was like for the class, and then there was a separate like one credit um for like the presentation of the final thing. So yeah,
Yeah.
I was a good student. It felt good.
Yeah. One thing that I think is an interesting theme about what helps you to be able to produce things the way that you have, including this festival and many of your other projects that you've worked on, is your graphic design experience.
Yeah.
That a lot of things that you end up delivering or trying to put out into the world have a very polished look, professional look to them. It's essentially it's judging a book by its cover, and so you make sure you put a really nice cover on it,
Right.
no matter what it is. And I think that's something that tends to give. It's something that's not, the artwork can stand on its own, but
Hmm.
when you put a nice little frosting on it, it makes people look at it a different way. It makes it come off as more professional. And I think that's something that a lot of your work has been able to benefit from, is your other skill of graphic designing.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about your philosophy with graphic design, especially how it relates to puppetry? Because I know you have thoughts on it.
I definitely have thoughts on that. So a couple things. First of all, w- graphic design to me is visual organizing and it's hierarchy. And so you should be able to look at any piece of a designed thing and understand what it is almost without having to read any of the text or any of the body copy or anything like that. You should just be able to be excited just by looking at the thing. And then once you actually start reading it, realize like, okay, yeah, and it sounds really stupid, but like, oh, the title's at the top, and then like in big letters, like the dates and all the information under it. And that sounds really like basic and kind of stupid, but it is something that people struggle with. And also when you're doing event signage for, um, an all day event with things happening in different rooms at the same time and like all those different things, it becomes a lot of information that you really have to be able to organize well and not overwhelm people when they look at the thing and say,
Yeah.
oh my God, there's too many words on that. And it's all these
Mm.
horrible clouds of text. I'm not even going to waste my time looking at it more because it just, it overwhelms people. And that's for
That's a
any kind of
feeling. You
graphic
just
design.
describe my feelings when I go to Pizza Plant and look at the menu. Their menu is looks like word vomit. It's just like it's the worst thing in the world.
And
Sorry, go on.
no, it's funny. And hopefully we could throw a picture up of Pizza Plant. To me, that's the exception that proves the rule because I actually love the the menu at Pizza Plant. It's this
The
restaurant
background's too
locally that
busy. You can't even see the
it's
words. I can't.
it's terrible. It's so bad, but there's something. It's probably just because I grew up going there with my family that I just
Oh,
am so
okay.
used to that
Yeah,
I love it.
it's nostalgic
Um,
to you.
yeah, exactly. But no, but so I always try to, do my best to organize things. And that again comes to, you were asking about writing scripts before and how do you put it all together? And it really does become these puzzle pieces
Mm.
of how do I put these in a way that are gonna be best um how will they best illustrate the thing that I'm working on. I've done programs and graphic design for the 2013 and 2015 P of A
Hmm.
festivals, and so if
Oh yeah.
anyone still has their programs, that that was me. And I loved putting those together because a P of A festival, there's so many events and there's so many shows to see. And granted, you have like 90 pages to fill that up, but that's going to be people's tool all week that they're using, and that better work like that, in the same way that like when you build a puppet and you need to make sure that like all of the mechs run smoothly, and they've got a really nice lever, and you're comfortable in there with your hand and the rods work the right way. A program has to do the same thing, or
Yeah.
a flyer or a poster have to do that same thing for the users and the people who are reading that. And so that's something that I'm always trying to take in mind when I design. And then the added layer for puppetry, and this is something that um, really hurts my heart when I see other puppeteers sometimes do their own graphic design, or especially, and you've felt this too, I know, um, when arts organizations or theaters do graphic design on behalf of the puppeteer or on behalf of the
Mm.
show, and they do things that they think people want or need to see, um, like a font that feels fun and fancy free, just because there's puppets in it. But it's like, no, we're doing like Hand to God, or we're doing Equus, or like we're doing something
Yeah.
serious. Um,
Yeah.
and also overloading people with imagery,
Yes.
which is a
And
really
let me just
easy
touch on that for
trap.
a second too,
Yeah.
because it's something that I learned a lot. Because before I knew you, I was like,
Hmm.
I'm an artist. I can do my own designs.
Yeah.
And I didn't know, you don't know what you don't know. I didn't
Right.
know how bad it was until I saw you. Then you started doing stuff like, no, I do something, then you'd redo it. And I'd be like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Not only is that better, but now I see the flaws that I made.
Hmm.
And I can interrelate that even to puppet building. It's a difference between having a puppet built. This is especially for theaters that are doing shows like Avenue Q. A lot of theaters are
Yeah.
like, well, we're just going to build our own puppets. Okay. And I'm sure they have craftspeople and prop makers that can make a beautiful looking puppet, but it's not going to move right, probably.
Right.
There's there are little nuance things that are special to that art form
Yep.
of graphic design that isn't directly relatable to necessarily every other art form. So just because you're
Eh,
an amazing artist doesn't mean that you're going to be able to do your own graphics justice in that way. And sometimes the hardest thing is swallowing that. And knowing that,
Yeah.
because again, you don't know. I was confident that I could do it myself and make it look professional, and I convinced myself that it did look professional, but it didn't.
You
And
were
it
very
looked bad.
confident.
You will never regret getting a professional graphic designer, even
Yeah.
if you only do it once, just to as a way to teach yourself what you don't know.
Hmm. Absolutely. And that's not to say that puppeteers can't make great graphic designers.
Yeah.
I could think specifically of like Valerie Meese and Amy
Mm.
Rush.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And there's all sorts of puppeteers out there who are wonderful graphic designers. When I've presented at P of A festivals about uh, graphic designing for puppets, I kind of because I'm at a festival, I kind of use the example of like you've got your Ernie brain and you've got your Bert brain,
Mm.
and so your Ernie brain is the person who makes the show, um, and you could be freewheeling and fancy free and like get all sloppy and got all the paints on the ground and like just really make a mess and be creative, and that's how you make the beautiful thing that people want to see. But you need that Bert brain to like color code the socks and
Yeah.
and get all the spoons in the right size. And it's the Bert brain that does your promotions and your publicity and your graphic design. So that's kind of how I break it down and how I see it. But one other thing about creating images that overwhelm. And this is something that I had to learn. And thank goodness for Richard Germany. Anybody who's interested in doing any kind of puppet publicity or puppet photography should go to Richard Germany's website, which we could link here.
Mm-hmm.
But his ability to take a single photo that captures the entire mood and the entire feel of a performance is really uncanny. I mean, he's the best of the best. But I think that's a really important skill to be able to do versus sometimes you see posters where like there's a million different images and you see the entire cast of puppets and you see all these different scenes and stuff. And it just becomes too much. Like you want people's eyes to be able to rest on a singular image. And then with that, like, a singular logo design for the title of the show or whatever. So the closer you could get to that, the better, I think. And it takes time and practice. And I think in terms of that, I think one skill that people can try to develop is look at graphic design that they really like. Try to replicate that if they can, if they have a program like Photoshop or Adobe Illustrator, even in something like Microsoft PowerPoint is a way. I say that opposed to Microsoft Word because it's kind of easier to move objects around.
Yeah.
And there's probably even better things out there now, that you could download as apps and stuff. But
Yeah.
The more you could try to recreate things and understand how those building blocks work and why people are responding to that, the better.
Yeah, and a good place for people to see. First of all, obviously on your website, there's tons of examples of all of your graphic design work.
Yeah.
But a nice, fun way people can just kind of follow it along is to follow your Instagram because you have your 10-minute typographies that you do. Is that weekly?
It's usually a couple times a week. It used to be daily, and that was a little too much. I'm doing it a little bit more now that we're in quarantine.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a regular thing that comes out.
Yeah, one thing I like a lot about it is you do go over so many different styles. Sometimes I scroll by it and I don't even realize it's you again because you're playing with different designs and fonts and layouts that make it probably a good exercise for you as well.
Absolutely. And that was something that I started doing, I think a year or two after having graduated. And I was working in two different places, and I had been there for a while. I was working at Canisius High School and St. John's Elementary School, which are both places that I went to as kids. And but anyway, I was doing design for them, and it was always the same colors. It was always the same photo type layout and style guide, and it was always the same fonts. Which was fine for the projects that I was doing for them, but I was realizing that I was like literally forgetting how to use certain tools in Illustrator. And I was like not being as I wasn't taking the time to like really be creative or taking risks with different color palettes and stuff. So a friend of mine suggested like, why don't you start just doing type stuff every day? And I was like, that's a cool idea. And so I came up with this thing. It was like, it's going to be 10 minutes a day. I just hop into Illustrator and play with a quote. Sometimes it's a song lyric. Sometimes it's something that I'm thinking about, and sometimes respond to like the day's events or something. And I compile different pictures. I download different fonts, and I just kind of put that up there. And sometimes they take 2 minutes. Sometimes I'm working on them for an hour or so, but it averages more or less at 10 minutes. And it's a really fun thing. I'm just about to hit 900 of those. That'll
Wow.
probably happen next week. And
That's
I've been
awesome.
doing it, like I said, like since 2015.
Wow, that's awesome. That's really great.
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's always nice to have another body of work to exercise and play around like that. That's awesome. That's really great.
Yeah.
All right. Now, the next thing I wanted to get into was at some point along the line, you met a fool named Adam Krutinger, which was the beginning of the end. But because obviously we've done a lot of our work together, and I'd probably argue both of our best work together on different projects. Where, because you might remember better than I do. I'm sure you do. Where did that all start?
So I was a sophomore in college, so I don't know where you would have been. You were maybe are you just 1 year ahead of me school wise?
I don't know. I'm 32. How old are you? 30?
I will be 30 at the end of this year. I'm 29 right now.
Oh, that's right. Okay, 29. So yeah, it's a couple years.
But what?
At least 2
So
or 3
anyway,
school
I
years.
was, because I know you were still at Buff State, and still had another year or so to go. I thought, but
well, I took the long route
school.
anyway. I think it took me 5 or 6 years to finish.
Oh, okay. Okay,
I went part time at some point, and yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But no, so anyway, I was a sophomore at Damon, and a friend of mine was the stage manager of a show at the Alt Theater in Buffalo. She was doing Evil Dead, and
Evil Dead the musical.
Evil Dead the musical, and we were hanging out one day, and she was like, "Yeah, there are these people in the show who like do puppets, and they've got like these frogs and a magician and like all these different like characters and stuff." You didn't have Felix yet, but it was like Sebastian and Lily and Amphibian and some of those early characters that you did with the Nimmels, and she said like you should really like meet up with those guys. And so this was in the fall. We became Facebook friends, and then because of my school schedule and then the holidays and stuff, it was later that next January. So that was 2011. And we met up at a coffee shop, and we started working together right away on things, because you built Mickey for me for one of the first show that I wrote and directed at Damon.
Something that I'm supposed to be, right?
Yeah,
that was a great show. I forgot all about that.
That was so much fun.
Yeah,
that was really cool.
You gotta find a way to do something with that too. That was great. People need to see that.
I'd love to do it in a way that like wouldn't get us sued.
Yes. Yeah, actually, I don't know if that's going to be possible. Actually, just for will you explain what that is for people too?
Yeah. That was it was kind of a retelling of the last months of Jim Henson's life. Because I realized I had read the book Street Gang by is it Michael Davis? I think. I can't see it from my bookshelf, but yeah, it was that Street Gang book that came out in 2008, and I realized how much the way that Eisner pursued Jim to get all of the Muppets, including the Sesame Street characters, really kind of mimicked the Muppet movie. I couldn't believe it. Like, it had never occurred to me that like the way that Doc Hopper was really trying to like get Kermit and stuff him and make him this like corporate mascot, was like, oh, that's kind of the same thing. And so I worked on a show, and Bob Waterhouse, who I've mentioned a couple times, and Chris Branges, who's another local theater maker and a professor at Damon. They both suggested to me, like, why don't you make this a fairy tale and kind of open it up a little bit so it becomes this like true thing of like good versus evil, and some of like you could get magical and mythical with it. And so I kind of took elements of Shakespeare's The Tempest, and I put Jim on this island where the Muppets weren't characters he performed, but like these real creatures that he brought to life. And it was a really neat thing. But Michael Eisner was the villain, and Mickey was sort of his lackey. And so I built all the Muppet characters in that, and you built the Mickey.
Yeah, man. Wow, that would be so cool to see that like as a real movie and produced or something.
Oh my gosh!
Because it was
Absolutely.
such a fun thing to watch, and it was such a compelling story. Yeah, it would. Is that online for people to see too, or is it?
I
think it is.
Think
it
might be.
Yeah, somewhere on your YouTube channel.
Really nice, and they featured it.
Oh yeah.
Again, this is like 2011. So
Yeah.
it's a long time ago, but I think you could still see an interview that they did with me there, and all the video links were up.
Yeah.
No, actually, when I worked at Bucks Rock, which is this arts camp
Mm.
in Connecticut, I spent a summer there, and we did some really fun puppet things. But for a while, I thought I was going to be going back to spend some time there in 2017. And one of the theater makers there, I had told him about the script, and we were actually going to do it there with like little 11 and 12-year-old kids performing
Mhm.
it. And I actually like did some drawings of like making Kermit, because in the version that I did at Damon, we did it all like Avenue Q style, but we were going to actually make um almost like Lion King style versions of the Muppet characters and
Mm.
Mickey, and it was going to be really really cool. And there was this one theater there that would have worked great. It was like this black box space and stuff,
Mhm.
but anyway, yeah, definitely would get sued by like everybody.
Yeah, for doing that.
I remember
Yeah.
in the playbill for that, it was like one of those stupid YouTube disclaimers where like someone posted an episode of The Office and they're like, "Sorry, NBC, we don't own any of this." And the thing in the playbill was like Sesame Workshops, Children's Television Workshop, Walt Disney's The Muppets, Eisner Corp, Henson Legacy, like all these different things. Like we don't own any of this, and yeah, it was silly. But
Yeah.
yeah, that was our first collaboration.
That's right, our first collaboration. Yeah. What was the first thing though that we actually worked on together? Do you remember? It wasn't Sweet Jenny's, was it?
No, it would have been well, I started doing some Nimble stuff with you.
Oh gosh, our
Um
live shows.
I did some live shows,
Yeah.
and a lot of that first like year or two that we knew each other was so much of like you were building Muppet replicas and I was helping you. Um
The dark
and you were
ages.
Yeah.
The dark ages of puppetry.
Yeah,
The,
I
the
know,
the
I
the ones
know.
that haunt us forever.
Right, right, right. But like I had so many. Oh my god, I can't believe the
And one
number
thing
of
I
like
want to say for clarification too
yeah,
is that was very little of of my desire because again my relationship with the Muppets of not really being familiar with them it was
right.
more so like you and Zach saying hey build a Fozzie build a Kermit
Yeah.
and I was like hey it looks like a fun challenge so I just did
Right.
it
Right,
and
right,
then so
right,
you guys
right.
could play with them
No,
but yeah.
but yeah, so like I just had so many reference photos. Oh my god. And I remember sending you like just folders and folders
Yeah. Oh,
of
I
reference
remember.
pictures. But no, I think it was probably Snow Monster would have been the first thing that
Oh
we
yeah, was that
like
before Sweet
really
Jenny's?
produced
Yeah.
together. Yeah, because that was my senior year that we built and performed um Snow Monster. And then it was because I remember helping you with script revisions when I was a student at Damon. And then Sweet Jenny's was we did Garage Fun Time and
Oh, Crotch Fun Time. That's right.
oh no, you know what was first? Because this was when I was a junior, was Just Looking Antiques.
Oh gosh. Oh no, don't say those words. That's the one I've truly erased from my history.
Oh
Oh gosh.
boy,
Oh gosh.
Just
It
Looking
was it was
Antiques.
quite a learning experience. I learned a lot on that.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah. Um,
yeah.
I was an intern at IBC Digital, which is an animation company that has done all sorts of stuff. They did Choo Choo Soul for PBS. They did the animation on that. They did some scenes in some of the Harry Potter movies with helping out with
Didn't they
digital
do
effects
some
and
Sesame
stuff.
Street stuff too?
They did some Sesame Street stuff. They did all of the the Kid Cuisine Penguin
Oh,
um
yeah.
animations, and they were teamed up with Damon because of Damon started an animation program, and I was a junior and a senior, and a really hardworking student, and I became an intern for them doing, specifically, they wanted to branch out a little bit and start doing some puppetry things because of their connections with all these different things. And one of the first things we did was a Sweet Jenny's commercial that I kind of helped them with some logistics and stuff. But
No, not
boy, what
Sweet
a learning
Jenny's.
experience!
Just looking.
Just looking. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and boy, what a learning experience and what a train wreck of a final
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. That was, I say I kind of regret the outcome. I don't regret the experience fully. However,
Agreed.
I think I'd say that experience for me kind of what is the thing that sealed the deal for me saying like we need to produce our own stuff.
Yeah.
Like we can't I don't want those. I'm not saying those people were not reliable, but I don't want to have to rely on other people.
Right.
And
Right.
yeah, and then
And for people who don't know, because we're kind of glazing over it, but it was this. We did a series of 3 commercials, all shot on one day. There were, I think, there were easily 25 puppets. Some that you built, some that I built. Throughout these 3 commercials, and it was really like, what if the Muppets inhabited this, kind of took over this antique shop with all these different rooms with different, you know, toys and antiques and all these different things. And it was obviously it was all our own characters, but we didn't have any monitors.
oh
The
gosh,
production team that they had hired had never done anything with puppetry before. Um, it was a very tedious day, and that's actually where we came up with one of our long-standing running gags with the projects that you and I do when something's not going right for a technical reason, and because I was doing a talking head thing where my character had to look directly into the camera and like do the opening, like, welcome to Just Looking Antiques, like, let's see what's going on. And I couldn't lock eyes with the camera because I was down here and couldn't, I didn't have a monitor. I had no idea. And the the guy behind the camera just says to my boss at the internship, this kid can't take direction well.
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
And it was like I'd be able to, you jerk, if I had any way of seeing anything. And
yeah.
so I know
Those
that's
aren't
something that
my
we
eyes on the puppet. I can't tell
I,
if it's looking
right,
at
right,
you,
right.
right?
They
Yeah,
also said, I remember you and Zach were performing a live-handed character, a two-person puppet, and they couldn't understand why 2 people had to be on it. And it was very specifically that one of the characters like had to be doing stuff with both of their hands and
yeah,
the head, obviously. And it was like,
yeah.
can't you get one of those puppeteers out of there? And it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, yeah, I
no,
understand
we
why
literally can't.
you need someone to do both hands, but why do you need 2 people? It was like,
Right,
how do you think
right.
the head works? How do you think the head works, huh?
Exactly.
It's not
Oh,
real,
it's so bad.
buddy.
But
The Muppets that got you fooled.
I know. And you probably feel the same way. I maintain that that was, like you said, it was kind of the kick in the butt of like, that's how to do it wrong. That's where there were so many puppeteers
Mm,
on that. And I think definitely the Sweet Jenny's commercial was kind of a response to
yeah.
how bad the Just Looking ones went. And we
Yeah,
kind of were able
I think
to,
I personally would say that was our first true project together because the other
yes,
ones,
yes.
we were
We
kind
didn't
of
have
working
control.
on each
We were
other's
working on it.
projects.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly.
Even
Exactly.
Snow Monster at that point, that was more so something that I kind of started, and then
Right.
you helped with. But I would say Sweet Jenny's was our first full collaboration. I think,
Yeah.
from ground up.
Hmm.
But yeah, wow, 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 wow.
I know. It's going to be 10 years next year, which is insane, of you and me working together.
Yeah, no, that is crazy. That's a long time.
Yeah.
Speaking of Sweet Jenny's, one of the
Hmm.
things that kind of opened my eyes to the creative process, to a creative process that I wasn't as familiar with, was you doing your storyboards
Yeah.
and how helpful that was for us to create something like that.
Hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so pretty much every, big project that we've done at this point, I think I've done a storyboard for. Definitely Arlo, definitely our mini dental implant commercial. But yeah, so I mentioned that I was taking that Damon, when I was a student there, started an animation program, and I jumped on that because one of my favorite books that I discovered when I was in college. It's one of those like art of Disney and like behind the scenes on making animated movies. But there was this fantastic book called Two Guys Named Joe, and it was about Joe Ranft and Joe Grant, and they were two story artists at Disney and Pixar. So Joe Grant was like Walt's right hand man through through Bambi and like all of the like true classic Disney movies, and then Joe Ranft was the lead story uh, person at Pixar. So like any really great moments that you could think of that are like really true funny things in a Disney Pixar movie came from him. Or even he worked on some of the Disney Renaissance films. And like my favorite thing to point to that he did was when Chip in Beauty and the Beast meets Belle for the first time, and he blows all those bubbles out of his head. Like that was a Joe Ranft idea. Like, oh, when he meets Belle, he should like kind of entertain her with those bubbles. Um, anyway, I'm saying all this to say that it it really opened my eyes to how much a storyboard artist is able to contribute to um, the making of a project. And I learned that there were storyboard artists for Sesame Street and for Muppet movies. And I was like, oh, that's a really great way to kind of have a first draft of a project before you commit all this time to filming. And is it going to look right? And are you going to get the right coverage and stuff? Um, so Sweet Jenny's was the first time you and I visited the ice cream shop, um, and I took a bunch of pictures from all these different angles that I thought would maybe work for filming, and then I just drew in my with my Wacom tablet a little version, practically a stick figure of Jimmy, the puppet character, and we laid down a dummy track, and so we had a working video basically of what that whole commercial was going to look like, and we presented that to the shop owner before we ever filmed. And that's just a really great way, I think, of being able to um, kind of see what your thing is going to look like before you make it, and you could watch it in real time, and that's a really good way of
Mm.
knowing where the comedy beats and stuff are.
Yeah.
And it's a
Yeah,
way
for me
I really like
initially,
working. Yeah.
yeah, for me initially, I just saw it as an extra step
Yeah.
that would kind of be honestly a waste of time when I
Hmm.
first was on seeing it. Um, and however, it is really, especially in that case that you just described, where you're showing it to a client
Yeah.
to make sure there's no any revisions. It's the best way to do it because you don't want to do any production and then have changes because
Right.
that is backward and making it much more of a headache for yourself in many ways. So especially in doing client work, being able to create storyboards is
Mhm.
humongous for not having to do extra work once you do get to production too.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we're
Well,
go on.
oh no, I was just gonna say when we did our mini dental implant commercial, we were back and forth with that client for almost a year of like where should the setting for the commercial be and all those stuff. And so that was constant storyboard revisions, which is great. And then even once we got the initial storyboard approved, I'm sure you remember we actually went in with the puppets that you had finished. And we did then location scouting specifically in the dentist office, that we were making sure like, are you okay with this location? Are like, so even though they had seen it in like a rough version that I kind of
Yeah.
just drew and made up with reference photos, then we did another round of things with the actual puppets that had the true, obviously, like proportions and stuff. I always try to draw in puppet proportion, but it's always a little different when you have the
Yeah.
actual thing.
Yeah,
So we
they made they kind of served they kind of serve different functions. Like one
Right.
was just for the storyboard for the story that they approved,
Yes.
and then like you're saying, the next one for the locations. They gave them a really
Mhm.
good idea of what it was going to really look like.
Right.
And again, those are online too. We have those for
Mhm.
people to see that whole process, which was really fun and interesting.
And the whole
But
thing, because it was a commercial and because we had certain time limits and stuff, um, we were always using the same, we were performing to the audio track, we always knew that from the
yeah,
beginning. So it was actually like each version of the storyboard would actually sync up with the um, final version of the commercial too, which is kinda cool. But yeah, you could see that at our website.
yeah, that was an awesome project. I'm really proud of how that all turned out.
Yeah.
From the music that we had composed
Mhm.
to it being professionally shot with that was one of the first times we ventured into working with an outside filmmaker again. Um,
Well, no, even Sweet Jenny's we did, remember? Because we
oh,
had
that's
Dave,
right. Oh my gosh,
because
with
he was
Dave Lozinski,
rotoscoping.
right?
Dave
Yeah.
Lazinski. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. I was thinking we filmed it ourselves. I completely forgot about that.
Mhm. Yeah, no, Dave did the rotoscoping when Jimmy had to
Oh, I
jump.
remember that.
Yeah.
That was something. Yeah, I remember. I forgot that he also filmed it though as well.
Got it,
Yeah.
got it, got it.
No, great. No, one last thing I want to talk about before we get into your puppeteer stories, so get
Mhm.
them ready, is if you wanted to just talk a little bit about the Puppeteers podcast at all.
Yeah, we'll we've been working on the show now, and developing it, and we're working on it for 2 years now at this point, which is crazy. Our first episode that we recorded was, like, May 3rd, I think, of 2018, and then, we premiered, in June. So it's wild to think that we've been doing this for 2 years, but, yeah, I mean, it's one of my favorite things that we do together. I mean, I know it's not, creating our own puppet things, but I just so love contributing to um, sort of the oral history of the show, and I still pinch myself thinking about some of the people who we've been able to talk to. I mean, literally people who were heroes of mine that I would read about in, Jim Henson The Works and Sesame Street Unpaved and of Muppets and Men. Those things that I always had growing up, and it was like the books that I would hold up to my teachers like a crazy person, like, look how cool this is. Um, and the fact that we've been able to talk with them on the show has been really wild. And I think, not to toot our own horns, but I really enjoy the fact that we interview them as puppeteers and hopefully are um, asking these people questions that they haven't heard before from other people, um, or haven't been asked as much as like, how do you do the voice?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I,
think
I
we do
really
have a
love it.
unique perspective
Hmm.
as us together and even as us individually of
Yeah,
not necessarily having, though we are puppeteers in our own right and produce our own things, we don't have the same professional experience that
right.
some other people have.
Of course.
And we're not completely outsiders from a standpoint or like at a news interview type of thing.
Hmm.
So I think it's a different perspective from someone who's really people who are really just trying to make their own in puppetry, their own works and stuff. And I think that can make some interesting questions and stuff. And
I
yeah,
totally
it's
agree.
been super uh, great for me in so many ways, as far as just learning more about puppetry, which is what I
Hmm.
want to do. And again, the origin for it was I guess maybe a little bit selfish as to we wanted to talk to some of our friends,
Yeah.
and we figured other people might want to listen in too.
Hmm.
And yeah, and this is kind of what it's turned into, which has been great. But
Yeah.
that leads me
And,
to oh no, go ahead.
oh, no, I was gonna say one other thing, that I think I maybe shared with Matt Shackelford when I talked with him, but,
Mm.
you and I are kinda notorious for having these horrible spats as we create our
Mhm.
projects,
Yeah. Oh, I
and
know.
oh, yes, and, but I think, this is a really lovely thing where you're able to ask your questions with your point of view, and I will ask my questions with my point of view, and they marry really well together, and so it's almost like you're seeing, um, you're almost seeing our creation process in a funny way, because obviously, like, you and I will have these different points of view when we're working on a commercial or a short film, and at a certain point, we need to, um,
Make a
talk it
decision.
into synthesize it into one, like,
Yeah.
combined thing. But in this case, like, we're able to have our different points of view, and it's the guests that fill that in, and I think that's really special.
Yeah, and it's good to have those outside perspectives in a project like that versus
Absolutely.
when you have a timeline and you have to get it out. So that leads me to this.
Mhm. Oh, boy.
What's one thing about Adam Krutinger that you can't stand?
Hmm.
You might watch this
That's
too, so
a good
just be
question. Oh, I would hate for him to see this. Um, One thing about Adam that I can't stand. Um,
now. Are you having trouble coming up with something, or are you having trouble picking from the long
no,
list?
no, 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 no. I'm truly having trouble thinking of something, um, because I think at the end of the day, even though there are things that annoy me about working with you sometimes, it's no, truly, but like I understand that as your creative process. Um, I guess I think what sometimes, and I've talked today about like my perspective in trying to like really work things out on the page before I create, and I
Mhm.
kind of do my best to think and do like pre-production in my head, which I realize I do to a fault. Like
Yeah.
there are definitely times where I've kind of immobilized myself because I can't do any, like I don't produce the thing, or I don't make it because I'm still refining it and trying to work it out on the page. Um, but there are times where I think I get frustrated by your wanting to like shoot from the hip and like make the thing really quick, and like you've got that one like joke and an idea, and the next thing I know you've like got 8 puppets built for it, and it's like, but wait, let's like figure this out first a little bit. And I think that's the thing that I struggle with, because it's a creative process that is so foreign to me and so different from what I do, that it's just
Mhm.
like, oh, okay, like, but I've come to expect that. I've come to love that about you, and it's how we work together. So
Yeah, yeah, I think that's pretty well said about how she's explaining how we work differently. But I guess for me personally, I would say it's more of a matter of like I tend to make anything out of things around me. That's
right.
a puppet, and it's even some sort of video project.
Hmm.
So yeah, so like you just said, me making 8 puppets before we even have a story for it, it's like if I make those puppets, like that's the ideas I need to get out of my head so that I can go to that next part of the process for me. And yeah, maybe you're
Yeah.
right. You're definitely right. Sometimes I have to edit something then that I already did that I could have avoided doing. But
Right.
for me, the more ideas out allows more ideas in, which is
Hmm.
I think why I am the way I am. And also, I think another thing we could boil down our differences is shipping of projects. You know, that threshold. And I think a lot of people will look at this as a quality level, but it's not really a
Hmm.
quality level as much as just like you know, in a way, a lot of these things are, even though they're final projects, they're
Hmm.
kind of, in a way, rough drafts for something that could eventually be bigger,
Oh
right?
yeah.
In the
Uh-huh.
same way that your O'Neill project was, that's what it is. You're putting this thing, creating this piece to hopefully become something else. And that's the way I kind of
Right.
treat every single project, even if it is, uh, you know, even if we don't think it's going to have a future, because you can always kind of make things
Yeah.
better. And I'd generally rather be on to the next project rather than, so I guess it's that threshold of done enough where generally doesn't always match for us.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so for whatever that's worth.
Yeah. But again, it's that, no, and it's that's the kind of thing which again, I think it's those two things together that that allow us to kind of create the the things that we do. And it's it's you reminding me like, no, come on, let's wrap this up and be done with it. And it's like, oh yeah, yeah, you're right. And then it's also me saying like, but let's like spend 10 extra minutes on it and
Yeah.
like polish it enough so that if it is the last time that we visit these characters, the last time that we, do this thing, that like we'll be able to look back at it in 20 years and be like, yeah, okay, we were proud with that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Absolutely.
it's
Yeah.
all good.
Yeah. So, without any further ado, now what I want to get
Mhm.
into is your Puppeteer's story. What do you got for us today, Cam?
Boy, I wasn't expecting that you'd ask me that question. I came completely unprepared for that. No.
Oh.
Um, don't you love that when we usually edit that out, but when a guest is like, I what? That's a question that you ask on Puppeteer? No.
Okay.
Um, no. So it's funny. I don't know when I've been interviewed on other shows. That's usually a question that people ask me now is like, what's your Puppeteer story? And I
Mm.
always try to tell them something different. So it's
Mm.
not like
Yeah, repeating.
but
Okay.
so I don't think I've told this one. But at the 2015 P of A festival, um, there was it was the that was the 25th year of the O'Neill as well, of the conference. And so one of the evening performances for the O'Neill, or for the P of A festival, it was called Late Night with Eugene O'Neill. And so it was
Mm.
like this variety late show type variety performance, and Tyler Bunch was performing a Eugene O'Neill puppet, and his co-host was going to be Sonia Manzano from Sesame Street. She played Maria, and then there were all these other puppet acts and stuff. And I was helping out throughout the week, Jean Marie and Pam Arciero, Jean Marie Givens and Pam Arciero, with some of the production needs of that. They needed some graphics. They needed some mugs with the late night logo on it, and so I was just helping out in different ways in getting that show going. And the night of there was I was in the green room with Sonia Manzano, and I was definitely like having a bit of a fan moment, and I was trying very hard not to like gush or say something stupid or whatever. And I brought up, because again, I made these mugs that I think Jean Marie or Pam had bought from a dollar store, and we stuck a sticker on it to say like Late Night with Eugene O'Neill.
Mm.
um, Someone had brought her that cup, and and it was still dirty. It had like dust and crunch and stuff in it, and and so I went to go ask her what she wanted in her drink to be in that for the show, and it was like, oh, just water. But they had tea and soda and some other options, and um, but I went up to her and asked if I could take the cup out of her hand because someone else had presented it to her, and I was like, I need to take this because it's dirty. And I just had like no, I was so completely awkward and like just I I completely lost my composure around her because I was so in awe, and I was trying whatever. And there were other people talking to her, so I was like, I'm not going to waste her time. There's nothing I could say necessarily to her that is wonderful, or nothing that she had ever heard before. So I'm just going to let that celebrity be that celebrity. Um, and so it was this horrible moment. But then the next day, and I think you were with me for this, but she had a book signing of her Becoming Maria
Yeah.
autobiography. And I bought the book at the Yukon bookstore, and I went up to have her sign it. Um, and she went to go say like, who should I make this out to? And she looked at me and she was like, oh, you're the water boy, aren't you? And I was just like, oh no, that's not how I want Maria to have
Oh, wow.
remembered me. And it was just like, I was so embarrassed because like around other, and I don't know why, because around like Pam and Martin Robinson, and like I've met plenty of people from that show who I have no problem interacting with, and it was
Sure.
just this horrible like
Yeah.
melting point.
Yeah, I think the problem is too is that though those people you just mentioned though know you in a different way. You know,
Right.
that's the difference because I one thing I do find is approaching a puppet, you know, a well-known puppeteer or puppet
Hmm.
person, puppet adjacent,
Yeah.
who doesn't know us in any way. It's probably one of the most difficult things to do because, like, what do you go up like, "Hi, I do puppets," or
Hmm.
I'm a puppeteer too," and I'm sure they hear that a lot. And you
Right.
know, it's you know, it could be you know something more fan like or someone just doing their little thing for their nephews, which is nothing, there's nothing wrong with that, but like that's not what we are, and it's hard to distinguish the difference um in a very brief passing by type of way, and you don't want to come off as yeah, you know, a puppet owner rather
Yeah,
than a puppeteer.
exactly, exactly, especially at a P of A festival where that's
Yeah.
sometimes, a thing. But, you know what, it's funny, and I don't mean to prolong this longer than it needs to be, but, it's funny that you say that about meeting other people and having those encounters of, like, having them see your work, because it's just a really nice moment that happened with me. Um, it was my first time, meeting Marty Robinson was, at the O'Neill, when you're working on your participant pieces for the week, which is sort of your like extracurricular time of doing a personal project. Um, my first O'Neill, I pitched doing Humpty Dumpty, which I had written in Robert's class. Um, and I was very green at that point. I didn't really know people, and like I'm looking up at all these people who again were like, you know, all these celebrity and role models to me. And at the end of that circle pitch where everyone says their ideas, um, Marty Robinson comes up to me and he says, "Hey, would you mind if I help direct your piece about Humpty Dumpty? Because it's actually my daughter's favorite story, and I'd love to help out with that." And I was just
Wow.
like blown away because I was
Yeah.
like, "What? You're asking me if you could work on a?" I was just like, "Of of
Wow.
course." But that's so
Wow.
to your point of
Can you
like,
send in your resume, please?
I know, right?
Marty Robinson,
I'm
please send your
I'm gonna need,
resume to.
yeah, have would I know you from anything? Um, so yeah, but that goes to show you of like it's really great when people can see
Yeah.
our work. And that's something that I've learned, I'm sure you have along the way of so many of those puppeteers who are people we admire really do try to keep up with the world of puppetry. And a lot of them do watch things on YouTube and Facebook and other things that come up. So there are lots of times where you do meet someone like a Pam or Sierra, who actually know your work before they ever meet you, and that's a really special thing about this community.
Yeah, that is great. Wow. Well, great. This has
Yeah,
been great, Cam. Now, finally, can you please tell us the best way for people to get in contact with you or to follow
sure.
your work?
I'm on my website is camgarrity.com, and I'm on all the different social media things at Cam Garrity. Um, if you've listened to this and have no interest in hearing more about my work, but you still want to see graphic design of mine, you could follow the hashtag 10-minute typography. Um, and I also work on this podcast. I hope you've heard it before. It's something I'm really proud of. It's called Puppeteers Podcast. Maybe you could tell your listeners about it. It would be great.
I'll put a
And
link down below.
okay, perfect. So yeah, that's where you could find me, and I try my best to respond to people when they send me questions or anything, and I'm more than happy to help people through with some graphic design stuff. And I was thinking about this before. I have this like graphic design homework things for people who are just starting to learn about Adobe Illustrator. And it's literally just how to recreate a poster that I made. And I can send that over to you. People could download the zip file
Mm.
from your website, and they could kind of play along if they're trying to become a graphic designer or learn that a
Awesome.
little better. Yeah.
Well, this was great, getting a little bit more inside the mind of Cameron Garrity.
Exactly.
But
I look
it was
forward to flipping the script in another week or two.
it's been a pleasure to have you on, and hopefully we'll have you back on in the future in some capacity.
Yeah, I mean,
And
if you ever need a guest host, I'd be more than happy to help
yeah,
you out.
well, we'll see. We'll see. All right.
Thanks, Adam.
Adios, my man.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh boy.
Now here's the breakdown. For as much as you know that we like to make this seem like a free-form conversation, we do edit the show. So if there's anything you need stricken from the record, or if there's anything we need to correct, just let us know, and we can make sure that that happens.
Perfect.
Good. Do you have any questions for us before we get started?
I don't think so. What happens if I need to take a bathroom break?
If you need to take a bathroom break, you're just going to have to hold it.
Oh, man.
You're just going to have to. I actually keep a bucket right underneath me just in case. It can just plop right through.
You got it.